On June 25, 1906, the musical Mam'selle Champagne opened at the Madison Square Garden Theater. As the closing number played, billionaire Harry Thaw approached famed architect Stanford White, pulled out a gun, and shot White 3 times, killing him instantly. Amid the screams of the horrified audience, Thaw calmly approached his wife, kissed her, and told her, "It's all right, dear. I have probably saved your life." In that moment, Evelyn Nesbit became the center of the crime of the century. Hi, my name is Jennifer Beall, and today I'm in the library at Brucemore, a National Trust site in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. I love working in public history because I get to share the fascinating stories of people like Evelyn Nesbit. If you enjoy hearing stories like these, subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss another video from us. Born Florence Evelyn Nesbit on December 25th in 1885, or 1884 depending on the source, young Evelyn Nesbit didn't spend her childhood believing she was destined for fame. According to biographer Paula Uruburu, she did believe that she was destined to always get twice as many presents as anybody else, which, as a fellow Christmas baby, I can relate. The Nesbit family lived in the small town of Tarrenton, Pennsylvania, a few miles outside of Pittsburgh. Evelyn's father, Winfield Nesbit, is described by Uruburu as an unambitious lawyer, and her mother, Evelyn Florence Nesbit, was a woman skilled at sewing who expected to devote her life to being a mother and housewife. The couple had 2 children, Evelyn and her younger brother Howard. Winfield Nesbit tried to steer his daughter's destiny toward Vassar. He indulged her love of reading by filling a home library and encouraged her to take advantage of every opportunity for education. When Evelyn was 11, he moved the family to Pittsburgh. Unfortunately, he died shortly after the move. Without her husband's income, Evelyn's mother could barely afford to feed her 2 young children, let alone pay for their education. Evelyn was forced to drop out of school and work with her mother in a shop, while Howard was sent to live with relatives. The family desperately needed money, and Mrs. Nesbit soon discovered that young Evelyn could be the one to earn it. Evelyn began modeling when she was 12 and was discovered by a newspaper photographer in Pittsburgh. She found some success modeling for local artists, mostly women, who found that her youthful face made the perfect model for angels and fairies. Despite the extra money that this work earned, her mother made her quit and sent Evelyn to live with relatives in the country while she tried to find work in New York. After failing to secure work as a seamstress, Mrs. Nesbit decided to use the letters of introduction she received from the artist who worked with Evelyn in Pittsburgh. She had once questioned the propriety of her daughter modeling, but now saw it as her only chance for financial security. Evelyn began her career in New York, modeling for paintings like this one, Black Leopards by F.S. Church. In a 1920 letter to Irene Douglas, the purchaser of the painting, Church mentioned, "If you care to hear the rather remarkable career of the girl who posed for me on Black Leopards, she was not a model. I will give it to you." A remarkable career is an understatement for the notoriety that Evelyn achieved. Evelyn eventually grew bored of being a painter's model, which required long hours spent holding a pose. She went on to pose for photographs and eventually started a career on the stage. While performing in the musical Florodora, 15-year-old Evelyn caught the attention of Stanford White, a well-known architect 32 years her senior. This is where Evelyn's story takes a dark turn. I'll be discussing the abuse and sexual assault that she experienced from Stanford White. So if you want to skip this content, you can use the chapters below. Evelyn wrote in her 1914 memoir that her first impression of Stanford White was that he was very unprepossessing, that he was very kindly, and that he was safe. But White was the furthest thing from safe. The married man already had a hushed reputation for preying on young girls. Evelyn became his latest target after he saw her on stage. Determined to meet her, he arranged for a friend involved with Florodora to bring her to his home for a dinner party. After this first meeting, he continued to invite young Evelyn to his home. Her mother, who had once balked at the idea of Evelyn posing for male artists, encouraged the relationship with the wealthy older man. During one of her visits, White introduced Evelyn to the red velvet swing that would become a fixture in later accounts of her life. Evelyn recalled in 1934 that gorgeous swing with its red velvet ropes around which trailed green smilax was set in the high ceiling at one end of the studio. In her memoirs, Evelyn recounts the youthful joy of riding on the swing, writing, "I did not realize that childish fun could have any serious significance. I did not realize that this prepossessing and kindly man could have any other object in view than to amuse me." During a night when her mother was out of town, Stanford White invited Evelyn to his home under the guise of a dinner party. When Evelyn arrived, she found that she was alone with White. The two had dinner, with White pouring glass after glass of wine and champagne for Evelyn. After dinner, White took her upstairs and gave her another glass of champagne, at which point Evelyn recounted that, "I lost all self-control. I grew dizzy. The room whirled around faster and faster. I passed out." When Evelyn woke, she was lying naked in bed next to a naked Stanford White. The 16-year-old girl screamed and cried as White told her, "It's all over now. Now you belong to me." Depictions of White's relationship with Evelyn often describe it as an affair. The 1955 film The Girl in the Red Velvet Swing depicts Evelyn and White as lovers. In the musical Ragtime, based on the novel by E.L. Doctorow, the fictionalized version of Evelyn Nesbit sings, "I was once the lady friend of Stanford White." These depictions represent Evelyn as having agency and intention in the relationship, glossing over the horror of a teenage girl raped and manipulated by an older man. Evelyn's experience with manipulative men did not end with Stanford White. The wealthy and erratic Harry Thaw entered her life after seeing her perform in The Wild Rose. Thaw developed an obsession, attending over 40 performances of the production. He also had an existing obsession with Stanford White, believing that White had played a role in his exclusion from elite society. After years of trying to convince Evelyn to marry him, Evelyn told him that she couldn't because of her experiences with Stanford White. When she told Thaw the story of her rape, he sobbed, though, in my opinion, more likely from frustration that his nemesis had slept with the object of his affection than out of any true empathy for Evelyn. Thaw and Evelyn eventually married, and Thaw continued to force her to repeat the story of her abuse at the hands of Stanford White. Thaw's obsession with Evelyn's history with White culminated in the events of June 25, 1906. During a performance at Madison Square Garden, a building that White designed, Thaw murdered White by shooting him 3 times at point-blank range. Thaw's arrest led to what papers called the trial of the century. The murder and trial put Evelyn in the spotlight, as newspapers sold the sordid story of the model and chorus girl turned wife of a murderer. During the trial, Evelyn became a star witness. The defense relied on her to create a sympathetic image of Harry Thaw. Even though she didn't want to relive her abuse, Thaw's attorneys made her share her experiences with Stanford White. Newspapers across the country reported on the tale. One reporter described the questioning as the vivisection of a woman's soul, the tearing from it of its profoundest secrets, a rending, wrenching, merciless digging into its depths that, by comparison, made the rack seem less hideous and awful. Evelyn's story helped to develop sympathy for Thaw. His murder of Stanford White began to be depicted as the justified killing of a man who had defiled his wife. Attempting to discredit Evelyn, the prosecuting attorney read aloud from diary entries she wrote at the age of 17. Speaking of her classmates at a boarding school, one entry read, "These girls have been kept from the world all their lives and know very little of the mean side of it." And then on the other hand, there's not one of them who will ever be anything. And by anything, I mean just that. They will perhaps be good wives and mothers, and die good wives and mothers. Most people would say what could be better. But whether it is ambition or foolishness, I want to be a good actress first. Newspapers across the country published this entry. One reporter noted that hearing it read in court was the first time that Evelyn blushed, indicating that she must be ashamed of how she wanted fame rather than the trappings of a simple domestic life. I don't know about you, but I think I'd also blush if my teenage diary was read aloud to a courtroom full of strangers and then published in national newspapers. Despite the prosecution's efforts, Evelyn's testimony worked to convince the jury and the public that Harry Thaw should not face execution. Instead, he was found not guilty by reason of insanity. Thaw was sent to an institution, and Evelyn was convinced by his mother to take $1,000 in exchange for divorcing him. Evelyn Nesbit's fame waned in the years following the trial. She published memoirs in 1914 and 1934, which helped revive interest in her story. She continued to work as an entertainer, acting in several movies and performing in nightclubs. She divorced Harry Thaw in 1915 and faced financial and emotional difficulties as she tried to find new ways to support herself and her son Russell Thaw. Unfortunately, she experienced alcoholism and attempted to take her own life twice in the 1920s. After Harry Thaw died in 1947, Evelyn moved to California, where she became a ceramics and sculpture instructor. She passed away at a nursing home in 1967 at the age of 82, remembered as a caring mother and grandmother by her family. Evelyn Nesbit's life was one of the most sensationalized stories of the early 20th century. From childhood, she was treated as a commodity. When she's remembered today, it's often as a fame-hungry gold digger or a seductress. But those images don't match the true story of a young girl who grew up in poverty, suffered abuse, and went on to try to claim her own story. Her face continues to be used as a symbol of the Gilded Age, without recognizing her humanity. In 2019, Evelyn Nesbit was used as the subject of a 100-foot mural on the side of a New York apartment building, a more recent example of her image being commercialized. Even Evelyn's own words have been commodified. In my research, I found it impossible to track down an accessible copy of her 1914 memoir, while Harry Thaw's memoir is readily available through Project Gutenberg. Evelyn Nesbit's story is like that of many women in history. The popular images we have of her are a reflection of how she was portrayed in the media, rather than her true personality. Her own words have been obscured by the way people interpret her, making it difficult to understand who she really was. The next time you see her face in a museum, online, or in a mural, remember to consider the story behind the image. We'll be back soon with another interesting person you may have never heard of, so make sure to subscribe. If you have any ideas for topics you want us to cover, let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching.